Before I begin this video, I'd like to announce the winner of the Gianna Sisters DS giveaway. Thank you for those who entered. The winner is level 1 online. Please contact me at thegamenerd@hotmail.com to claim your prize. Let's begin the video now. What can I say about the Mother series that hasn't already been said on multiple occasions? I'd be lying if I said at this point in time I've finished all 3 games, but from what I have played, I've still enjoyed them quite a bit. I hope with this video I can do the series justice, since I know it deserves it. Let's get started. This is the development and beta of the Mother series. So starting things off, I obviously want to start with Mother 1, released for the Famicom on July 27, 1987. The idea for the game originally came from Shigesato Itoi, who at the time was investing many hours into playing Famicom games, and one series in particular he liked was the Dragon Quest series. Itoi would often think to himself what changes he could make if he were in charge of the game's development. Eventually, while visiting the Nintendo headquarters in Kyoto, Itoi was able to pitch his idea to Shigeru Miyamoto. At first, the game was rejected, and Miyamoto insisted that Itoi would have to do much more than simply provide ideas. Itoi was so upset that he cried on the train ride home. However, he later received a call back from Miyamoto, thereby commencing development. The game's name came from John Lennon's song Mother, which Itoi was moved by so much that he wanted others to be moved in the same way. The song itself dealt with Lennon's experience growing up without either of his parents. Itoi's own father was absent for much of his life, and because of this, he chose to isolate the role of an intense father as simply a voice on the phone. Another fun little fact that I can mention right now has to do again with Shigesato Itoi and his love for RPGs. Remember how I said Itoi would often play the Dragon Quest series? Well, in Twinkle Elementary School, one kid asks Nintendo in the Famicom version, "Have you played Dragon Quest 7? I'm still having trouble with Dragon Quest 3. In the NES version, Dragon Quest 3 is replaced with Mario 3, and Dragon Quest 7 is replaced with Mario 7. The development of Mother initially began with a team that had been formed by Nintendo in 1987. This group was known as Nintendo Tokyo Research and Development Products. However, this wasn't the only team to work on Mother during its development. The president of Nintendo at the time, Hiroshi Yamauchi, thought rather well of Shigesato Itoi's work on Mother and suggested to him the idea of a company that would help support new talent within the game industry. Springing from the roots of this idea, Ape Inc. was born on March 1987, with Shigesato Itoi as its chief executive officer. Afterwards, Ape Inc. joined Nintendo Tokyo Research and Development Products in the production of Mother during its last few months of development. With all the work going into this game and everyone behind the project, the advertising for it was great, as you can probably imagine. The most famous advertisement is a 30-second commercial which depicts the characters Nintendo, Anna, and Lloyd being confronted by a giant robot before dispatching it with a psychic attack. Afterwards, the 3 children face down the source of the threats, Mount Itoi. The music heard in the background is a choir rendition of a song in the game called The 8 Melodies. Additionally, flyers were produced to advertise the game. One of these depicted the imagery of 3 children facing Mount Itoi, just like in the commercial. Finally, on July 27, 1989, Mother was officially released on the Famicom in Japan. Alongside the game's release was the Mother Encyclopedia, which was a guidebook containing walkthrough information and extra information about the game's universe. To the pleasure of both Itoi and Nintendo, the game was massively successful, selling 150,000 copies and receiving positive critical reception as well. After the success of Mother in Japan, a localization of the game went into production to bring the game over here in the US. At the time though, RPGs weren't as popular in America as they were in Japan, but they were still gradually gaining traction among the ranks of American gamers. The question was, if Japan was going to bring this game to the States, how were they going to do it? Well, to put it simply, they didn't. At least not right away. For those unaware of how the game is in Japan, it wasn't exactly something that Nintendo of America would just want to translate and sell. It had a lot of things in the game that had to abide by the Nintendo of America guidelines in order to be sold without issues. Things such as crosses, gore, and much more had to be removed or altered. This was of course done, and the game even got mentioned in issue 19 of Nintendo Power. It seemed to be scheduled for release in 1991, so why didn't it get released? It's ultimately believed that even though the localization was finished, the game just wouldn't sell too well with the Super Nintendo coming out very soon, and the NES becoming outdated. Alongside how RPGs just weren't a very big hit in America yet, let alone the NES, the game was quietly put back into Nintendo's vault of unreleased games, where it wasn't talked about again until years later. In 1998, the fan translation group Demiforce found a beta cartridge of the game on eBay and organized an effort to collect enough money to buy the game. The project was successful, and soon after, the game was dumped into a ROM and circulated around the internet. Due to a glitch with the most accurate emulator of the time, Demiforce hacked the game while also appending 0 onto the title to retroactively discern it from its sequel, Earthbound. This hack ran in Nesticle, but also triggered a new anti-piracy message at 2 key points in the game. The game was since further hacked to prevent such issues. It wouldn't be until many years later that Earthbound Zero was given an official release by Nintendo in the United States and Europe as Earthbound Beginnings on June 14, 2015. It's fully translated into English using the same ROM as the unreleased NES prototype and the Mother 1+2 release. This release though was a virtual console release, and only for the Wii U however. Nonetheless, it was a release that many fans were very happy to see. So, just how much beta/prototype content is out there for this first Mother game? Honestly, from what I was able to gather at least, not a lot. However, there's still a bit, so let's take a look, shall we? Here's a trailer from Famimaga May 1989. It shows a prototype version of the game, and we know it's a prototype because it has some small differences from the final release. The first one being that the copyright information is in a larger 8x8 font and is displayed differently. There also appears to be a misplaced tile in the lower right corner. We can also see that the telephone sprite in Intense House is different as well, and the text breakers are arrows instead of bullet points. The path from Intense House to Podunk is also different, leading west instead of east. The motorboat is located on the west side of the dock rather than the north side, and the plane in the desert area is white, which became red in the final. And lastly, for the footage shown, there's enemies shown that usually don't fight together in the final game. 2 unused enemies remain in the final game though, Pippi and a possessed pillow, both with intact stats. Due to the way the game reads enemies when a battle starts, they don't have intact palettes. The palettes are stored in the game's encounter group, not the enemy itself. The 2 enemies share name pointers with the used enemies Gang Zombie and Doll, due to appearing next to them in the game's code. The last unused sprite looks like some kind of wheel. Obviously it's nowhere in the final game, but also because of how there's really nothing to go off of, it's unknown what this could have been used for. 5 years after the release of Mother 1, the game Mother 2 was released in Japan on August 27, 1994. The game was designed by Shigesato Itoi and produced by Satoru Iwata. The game itself was also developed over the course of 5 years by Ape, who later became Creatures, along with being developed by HAL Laboratory. Because of it being developed by 2 studios, the work was of course split between them. Ape had more people working on the title and oversaw the data aspects of the game, while HAL worked on the programming side. Because of how long it took to develop the game, Itoi has stated that he's felt the project was doomed many times. It also came under repeated threats of cancellation. More issues came from the data restrictions of the Super Nintendo's cartridge size. Originally, the game was designed for an 8 megabit cartridge. However, that was later expanded to 12 megabits, and it was expected to be released in January of 1993. This didn't happen though, and the game got pushed in size one last time to a 24 megabit cartridge. The game was finally finished around May 1994, and the Japanese release date was set for August 1994, with the US release date eventually being set for June 5, 1995. With the extra few months leading to the release date in Japan, the team played the game and added small, personal touches. Itoi also told Weekly Famitsu that Shigeru Miyamoto liked the game and that it was the first role-playing game that Miyamoto had completed. A pre-release party for Mother 2 took place on August 24th in a hotel in downtown Tokyo. During this event, Miyamoto was quoted as saying, "These 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. After all, my children were in preschool when we first started working on the game, and now, they're already old enough to understand it. I beat the game together with my daughter. It was the first time I'd ever finished an RPG on my own." Mother 2 went on to sell around 300,000 copies in Japan when it got released and became a great success in Japan, eventually rising to number 1 on Weekly Famitsu's top 30 chart along with hearty recommendations by the magazine's reviewers. The game had to be brought to the US, unlike the unreleased Mother 1. But the question was, how? Meet Marcus Lindblom. In 1990, this man took a job at a Nintendo call center in Redmond, Washington, where he typically worked customer service and field calls from people back then looking for tips on how to get past the harder parts of games such as Mario and Zelda. After finishing school, Lindblom moved over to Nintendo's game group, taking the all-purpose title of software analyst. Although Nintendo's development teams are all based in Japan, both then and today, their American headquarters plays an important role in translating, polishing, and producing games for Western audiences. Lindblom would end up working on games like Wario's Woods and eventually Mother 2. When Nintendo decided to bring Mother 2 into the US, they renamed it to Earthbound to avoid any confusion. The game being completed, of course, really only needed translating and some polishing up for the Western shores to comply with Nintendo of America standards. When Lindblom began working on the translation, a Nintendo writer named Dan Owsen had already written about 10% of the script. However, Owsen moved on to another game, so the bulk of the work was left to Lindblom and, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, Masayuki Miura, whose role was to help Lindblom understand what was going on in the game. The two worked off of paper, A translator would go through the Japanese script and send Lindblom rough English translations, while Miura would help him understand the tone and message that Earthbound director Shigesato Itoi and crew were trying to convey in each scene. Lindblom wrote a lot for the script, from jokes to combat messages to items and even weapons. The amount of text in Earthbound is insane, which also helps make it a very good but time-consuming game. Lindblom was even quoted as saying, "It was a large amount of work in a really short amount of time. I know in the middle of it I went through a stretch of about 30 days when I didn't take a day off, and I was doing something like 14 or 15 hours a day. It was just lots of grinding out time with the text in the game." All in all, Lindblom spent an entire 4 months writing the English text for almost all of the game. Unfortunately though, Lindblom would soon be disappointed. Earthbound had a very distinct marketing campaign. Their main slogan was "This game stinks," and the same Nintendo Power magazine that promoted it, issue 74, had scratch and sniff stickers inside that also had foul scents and also had comments such as if life didn't stink enough already, now you've got to be prepared for Earthbound, the first role-playing game with BO. The promo went on to say things like, "We're warning you, this game stinks," along with, "Not only does the game of Earthbound reek like foul creatures from the sewer, but Nintendo has made the product even more repulsive with a player's guide that comes packaged with the game." It also didn't help that in the US when the game got released, most players had stated that the graphics seemed too cartoonish or outdated compared to other RPGs at the time like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI. Another factor that didn't help sales was the game's price point. Since it came bundled with the strategy guide, it retailed for $69.95, compared to other games people knew wouldn't stink, like the NBA Jam on Super Nintendo, which retailed for $74.99. When Earthbound had just about finished selling, it sold around 140,000 copies in America. That's less than half of what it sold in Japan. Naturally, when Lindblom saw the reviews and sales figures, he was crushed. Earthbound was then quietly put back into Nintendo's vault and not talked about again for a while. 4 years later comes the release of Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64, and it's here where Ness was given another chance as an unlockable character in the game. This is where most gamers in America actually got introduced to Ness as well, since the game sold 2.93 million copies in the US alone, making it the 5th best-selling game of the Nintendo 64 of all time. The game, while having nothing to do with Earthbound, obviously still gave players a chance to play as Ness, and introduced newcomers to a series that would soon be worth talking about and revisiting. So just what unused content and changes are known to exist for Earthbound on the Super Nintendo? Let's take a look, shall we? I hope you're seated because there's quite a bit. All of the other Chosen 4 characters have this animation, but Pooh is the only one who doesn't actually use it. Then we have variation of the Chosen 4's normal ghost sprites, plus one for Everdred. The game leaves it unclear as to whether or not Everdred died following your encounter in Fourside, but this sprite would indicate that he did. Since there aren't any sleeping sprites for the other characters, these were probably meant to be used in sequences early in the game, possibly waking up from Paula's psychic calls. We also have 4 sprites of King where it can be seen that he's supposed to be climbing a rope or ladder. This would mean that either King was supposed to stay with you longer in the game, or Ness's original travels through On It were supposed to include something to climb. Then here's Ness and Paula sitting with their eyes closed. Since there's no Jeff or Pooh equivalent, they were probably meant to be used in an event before Paula contacts Jeff, most likely when the two wake up following the zombie ambush. Also in the same category of sitting is Ness's mother sitting, a better but unused alternative to walking around in random directions. It may have been used for the prayer sequence involving Ness's family. This sprite appears when you talk to Jackie from above, but since that's impossible during normal gameplay, it goes unused. Then there's a capsule that looks exactly like the one containing Starman Jr. and Mother. This is found among the empty out-of-battle sprites, so it was probably supposed to be used as an alternative to the odd octagons used to represent the enemies in the last areas of the game. There's also a tiny Ness posing and a tiny photographer hanging around, clearly meant for the Lost Underworld. Alongside that is a tiny Escargot Express sky, also clearly meant for the Lost Underworld. Then there's this beating heart. It's possible that romance scenes were planned but didn't make it in. We also have a Sanchez brother cheering, meant for when you won something in the slot machine game. And then there's this small bird that's never seen in the game at all. It looks like it could have served a use pretty much anywhere. Ultimately, it's similar to the sparrows found in Mother 3. Before moving on to regional differences, let's talk about how this game was copy protected. The game has 4 different anti-piracy measures that you may see happen during the game if you play from an illegal copy. The first layer is pretty simple. It checks the console's PPU to make sure you're not running a PAL SNES. If you are, it throws up this error message and freezes. The second layer checks that there's only 8 kilobytes of SRAM, and if there's more than 8 kilobytes, then the game gives you this stem warning and freezes. A third and far more subtle layer of protection is activated if the game detects the previous layers have been disabled. If the other two layers have been beaten, then random encounters are ramped up to absurd levels, making the game borderline unplayable. Some areas even have enemies that aren't supposed to be in those locations, like spiteful crows in the pyramid. Lastly, if you somehow manage to survive all that, then you'll have one more layer waiting for you, which is triggered after Porky/Pokey turns off the devil's machine and insults Gygus. This one is the most cruel though, since after all that hard work is put into the game, it freezes and deletes your save file. Yeah. Let's move on to the regional changes now. The Tanzura brothers were changed into the Runaway 5 when they came to the US. The portrait next to the signboard was also colored in Earthbound. Lastly, the Runaway brothers themselves wear different clothes between the two versions. While still on the topic of the Runaway brothers, the reason for the name and color change was done likely to avoid any connection with the Blues brothers. Remember how I mentioned games had to meet a certain policy to be sold by Nintendo of America? Well, this is where things also got censored/changed. For starters, all bars in the games were changed into cafes. We also had drugstores changed into plain old shops as well. The sign of hospitals were changed to remove the Red Cross. This was done to avoid any issues with the company American Red Cross. Even the nurses inside had the Red Crosses removed from their hats. The Topolo Theater was changed to the Topola Theater, likely to prevent conflict with New York's Apollo Theater. We also have this truck sprite which was changed from the word come with a white swirl on the bottom to a running figure with unreadable text. This was more than likely done to avoid possible connections with Coca-Cola. The cultists of Happy Happism have the letters HH on their forehead. In Earthbound, they removed the HH on their forehead and added a pom-pom to the end of their hoods to help make them look less like the Ku Klux Klan. In Mother 2, Ness forgot to wear his pajamas in Magicant, then when it came time for the US release, Nintendo of America changed the sprite to a bed-headed Ness with PJs on. That's just about all the main information of unused and changed content from Earthbound/Mother 2. While again it didn't do well when it first launched in the US, it did gain a fanbase over time, and on July 18, 2013, this again was a very big step in the right direction for Nintendo, and since a cartridge of this game is normally well over $100, being able to play it officially for just $10 was a deal. It can also be noted that the story with Marcus Lindblom has a happy ending. Remember how I mentioned that he was disappointed to see the reviews of the game when it first came out? Well, after the game was released on the eShop, Marcus Lindblom logged on to Twitch TV, and it's there where he saw people playing Earthbound, and he was finally able to see their reactions live as they read the dialogue from the game. Every time they smiled in the right place or laughed at the right joke, he felt a jolt of vindication, validation. 18 years later, he could finally see people enjoying his work. Lindblom was quoted as saying, "Today, it's fantastic, because whether it's Twitter, people posting things they like about the game, or it's Twitch TV, it's nice to know people laugh when I sort of hope they would, or they smile at the stuff that I hope would make them smile. That's what really makes this worthwhile." Whereas 18 years ago, it was kind of frustrating and disappointing. For those wondering what advertising was like for Mother 2 in Japan, here's a magazine promoting the game. The boy on the cover is Takuya Kimura, who's a member of a boy band. Yeah, this is pretty much what they went with to promote Mother 2. Not that it's any weirder than what we got here in the US, I suppose. Still interesting to see how two different parts of the world would advertise the same game, I think. And at least the game itself ended up being a very well-made game. In 1994, development for Mother 3 had begun as a Super Famicom game. However, it wouldn't be until 1995 that Mother 3 was officially announced to actually be in development. Finally, in 1997, Nintendo announces Mother 3 Forest of the Chimera for the 64DD. And for those who don't know what the 64DD is, don't worry. It was only released in Japan as an expansion for the Nintendo 64, similar to the Famicom and its Famicom disk system. It flopped though, which is why it only stayed in Japan. You getting all this? As you can probably already tell, Mother 3's development during its initial stages wasn't the greatest, and ultimately, we wouldn't hear anything else about Mother 3 until 1999. It's now when Nintendo would once again move the platform of the game from 64DD to the regular Nintendo 64, and during Space World 99, a demo of the game was finally shown. The name was also changed yet again to Mother 3 Fall of the Pig King, with an expected release date of May 2000 and a price of 6,800 yen. During the presentation, small parts of the game were shown. Things we got to see include desert canyons, battles with masked pigs, underground dungeons, a rock and roll concert, and a scene where a giant green dragon runs alongside a futuristic bullet train. However, as I was making this video, a new leak for Mother 3 on the 64 was made. It's a video from Space World 99 that shows a little bit more footage. Most of the clips from the video have been known about since the turn of the century, but the one small part of the forest/jungle area is brand new to most fans. I'll let the footage speak for itself.
あのマザーシリーズの最新作がついに任天堂64で登場する。立体的になったぞ。
Two more problems though would soon emerge from the shift to the Nintendo 64. Shigesato Itoi and his crew had little to no experience with 3D titles, and without the aid of the 64DD, the game had memory constraints caused by little space available on the ROM's cartridges. This resulted in the title continuously being delayed until it was finally cancelled on August 22, 2000. At the time of the game's cancellation, Satoru Iwata estimated the game's completion at 30%, while Shigeru Miyamoto estimated it at 60%, which was clarified to mean that the game was about 60% coded, but only 30% playable. Also during its development, the game was stated to have 12 playable characters across 12 chapters, with the revealed characters including all of the party members that were shown in the final game, as well as 2 unknown characters. So just what got shown before the game was cancelled? Well, other than what I showed you from Space World 99, we still have some screenshots from the game. A lot actually. In fact, if I put them all in the video, it would drag it out for an unneeded amount of time. So that's why I've been showing some screenshots as I'm talking. I know some of you out there still want to see as much as you can, and so all my sources used in this video, including where I got these screenshots, will be in the description. Alright, let's move on to the next segment. It wouldn't be until 3 years later that in 2003, Mother 1 Plus 2 commercials began to air, and at the end of one of those commercials, that Mother 3 was announced to be in development for the Game Boy Advance. However, and while this might be disappointing to some, this was pretty much all we knew about Mother 3 for the Game Boy Advance. The only information that got put out there during 2003 up until 2006 were just articles stating how the game was still being developed and occasional interviews, of course. The very first big breakthrough though was probably what happened on February 14th, 2006. On that day, the first screenshots of the game were revealed to the public, and people naturally became even more hyped than they already were. On April 20th, Mother 3 is finally released to the public for 4,800 yen, and then sells 205,914 copies in its first 3 days on the market. Soon after, on May 3rd, Shigesato Itoi announced that he had no plans on releasing a 4th installment in the Mother series, and it's been that way even to today. So, just when did those of us in the US get to enjoy this great game from Nintendo? Well, we never did, at least not directly from them. Fans would have to take matters into their own hands if they wanted to play this unreleased game, seeing as how there was no interest to bring the game over stateside at all. And thankfully, on October 17th, 2008, an English translation was made available by Clyde Mandolin, aka Tomato. July 9th, 2014 was the last time the patch was updated as of the time of this recording, but it's nonetheless still complete and the only way to enjoy the game in English. We can all appreciate the hard work that Tomato and his team put into making this patch possible. Was Mother 3 even acknowledged by Nintendo though? Yes and no. To put it simply, fans over time would ask for it, but nothing would ever come of it.
It is in 2 weeks.
Any plans to bring Mother 3 to America?
Oh,
yes.
Everybody asking that.
Yes.
During E3 2014, there was also one small joke Nintendo did which was funny, but also hurt some fans a bit at the same time.
Come on, Reggie, give us Mother 3!
How about this instead?
As mentioned earlier, we did get Earthbound Beginnings and a re-release of Earthbound from the Super Nintendo, so we have 2 games from the trilogy officially released stateside, and that's a plus I'd say. Alright, let's now move on to the unused content from the final release of Mother 3 for the Game Boy Advance. What you're seeing here are unused battle background sprites. There's 14 in total. Not really a ton to say about these other than, ultimately, they wouldn't be used anywhere in the game. These next cut graphics were meant for the final boss battle in the game. Itoi had mentioned in interviews that the reason that this was cut from the final release was because he felt it would be too scary for the kind of game it's meant to be. Now we're getting back to sprites from the game. A lot of the bosses and mini-bosses from the game have unused back sprites you can't normally see in the game since they can't be approached from behind. They include the Strawberry Slime, the Cactus Wolf, the Forlorn Junk Heap, the Surprise Box, the Almost Mecha Lion, the Steel Mecharilla, Master Eddie, and the Firefly. The Masked Man also has a back sprite, which shows him unmasked but still holding his arm cannon. This enemy, Alkaline Man, is an original palette swap of Battery Man. Of course, he went unused, so in the end, he's never seen in the final game. The Tiny Forest is an unused enemy as well, and the only other enemy to have unique sprites. Next is an unused bear sprite with some honey on its claws and teeth. In the game, an item named Honey Showler allows you to summon bees to hit enemies, but sometimes the narration says that a bear showed up instead. No bears actually appear graphically though. This bear is associated to enemy 00, which is an enemy that can't be fought. This is a palette swap of Navy Squeal. This pig mask is associated to enemy 100, an enemy that can't be fought because of how the ram handles enemies. This one is also the last enemy with a sprite. Here's a set of graphics of the masked man exploding, floating, being repaired, and firing his arm cannon in a way similar to Mega Man. Now these next sprites were found in Aeolia's graphic bank. These show what appeared to be a very young Kumatora in winter clothing. It's possible that during an earlier storyline, a younger Kumatora would have been playable on Snowcap Mountain. We also have unused sprites of the item guy's tent pitched to the ground as well as the item guy's cart door open, revealing a person inside. There's Flint stabbing something with a Drago Fang, and sprites also exist of Flint clinging to the airship at the end of Chapter 5 who, according to the Mother 3 Earthbound 64 trailer at Space World 99, would have replaced Kumatora in the party at this point in the game. For character sprites, we only have two more. Both are dummy sprites. One is this yellow one whose sprites are copied at least 24 times in the ROM, that is often used as the overworld sprite for unused enemies, such as Tiny Forest. It resembles a slime from the Dragon Quest series. The one beneath it seems to be depicting an immobile naked man, which could have been used as the placeholder for NPCs on the overworld. It appears if the party gets a game over when Kumatora is in the lead, which is impossible to happen without the use of the debug room. In Chapter 8, in the toilet dungeon, there's an inaccessible room which contains an unanimated toilet overflowing. The animation of it overflowing is loaded with the other room's graphics. We also have 6 unused signs. Not much to be said about them other than they were likely scrapped early on since they lack any color palettes. Larger custom sprites exist for the Skyrunner, the Runaway 5 tour bus, a taxi, and the yellow submarine in the Hall of Memories. In the final game, their sprites are taken directly from Earthbound. A low-quality picture of the Ostrich Burger's historic Summit Inn Cafe on Route 66 is also found in the game's files. It's possible that this was simply inserted into the game to test how the game displayed graphics. It seems to closely resemble the Dirty Cafe found during the highway section on Chapter 5. For those wondering where the real restaurant is, the restaurant is located in Oak Hills, California. At least it was. Unfortunately, in August 2016, due to a fire, it was burned down and has since remained that way, not being rebuilt. Well, that just about wraps up the main things about the development and beta for the Mother series. For those who stuck around to watch the whole thing, thank you for doing so. I really appreciate it, especially with how much work got put into making this video. And I'm sure you guys enjoyed finding out all those cool facts. But nothing tops this, Butch eating an entire loaf of bread. Yeah, how awesome is that? Oh yeah, and while I was making this video, a couple pictures got leaked for a cancelled Earthbound game on the GameCube. While it isn't as interesting as Butch eating the loaf of bread, I'll still leave the article in the description. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. This has been DGN, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you, bye bye. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize we were recording yet. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like. If you guys aren't subscribed yet, I would appreciate it if you did subscribe because I do plan to make more videos just like this one. This one took a little while to make, but you know what? I think it was well worth it, especially with how it turned out. I was actually playing some Gear Club Unlimited on my Switch. And the reason why I bring that up is because I actually got Mario Maker 2 on the Switch. And it came with a 12-month individual membership for the online service. The thing is, I already have the online service, and I got the family plan because I use it for me and my brother. We both own our own Switches. So, I decided I'm going to do a giveaway for the online code. The winner of the code will receive it digitally, by email, message, whatever. They'll receive it digitally. If you're interested in the giveaway, just leave a comment, that's all you have to do, and I'll announce the winner during my next video. Thank you guys for watching again. This has been DGN, and I'll see you guys next time. So obviously I wasn't going to originally add this at the end of the video, but thank you guys for making it this far. I hope you guys still enjoyed the video. Anyways, so this is what was happening. During the making of this video, I planned to add pretty much everything that I could. This meant adding, GIF images of the cut content, so things like, Duster and Kumatora. Anytime I would add certain GIF images, not all of them, but certain ones, and there was a good amount from Mother 3 that, just for whatever reason, would make my editor do this. So I'm going to take Duster, I'm going to drag it to the timeline, and I'm just going to put it right there. And now we wait for it to crash. You see that? It's already crashing. It's frozen. What can I say? See? This is what would happen. I still hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys want to see the, cut content that I didn't get to add, then please check the description. Everything will be right there. Thanks again. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you later.